Welcome to the judge video for Zendikar Rising. I'm Serge.
And I'm Nelson. We're going to introduce you to the new and returning mechanics in this set. Double-faced cards are back in Zendikar Rising, but this time there's an exciting new twist. Instead of playing a card with one face and then trying to transform it, you now have the flexibility of playing the card face you want right away. To determine whether it's legal to play a modal double-faced card, consider only the characteristics of the face you're playing and ignore the characteristics of the other face. If an effect allows you to play a specific modal double-faced card, you may cast it as a spell or play it as a land, as determined by which face you choose to play. But remember, you can't cast lands. If an effect allows you to play a land or cast a spell from among a group of cards, you can only choose the face that fits the criteria of that effect. For example, if an effect lets you play a land from your graveyard, it doesn't give you permission to cast the spell on the other face. The converted mana cost of a modal double-faced card is based on the characteristics of the face that's being considered. On the stack and battlefield, consider whichever face is up. In all other zones, consider only the front face. This is different than how the converted mana cost of a transforming double-faced card is determined. Some cards outside of Zendikar Rising talk about transforming. A modal double-faced card can't be transformed or be put onto the battlefield transformed. Ignore any instruction to transform a modal double-faced card or to put one onto the battlefield transformed. Each face of a double-faced card has its own set of characteristics: name, types, subtypes, abilities, and so on. While a double-faced card is on the stack or battlefield, consider only the characteristics of the face that's currently up. Ignore the other face. While a double-faced card isn't on the stack or battlefield, consider only the characteristics of its front face. If an effect puts a double-faced card onto the battlefield, it enters with its front face up. If that front face can't be put onto the battlefield, it doesn't enter the battlefield. For example, if you flicker Sajiri Glacier, it will remain in exile as its front face is an instant that can't be put onto the battlefield.
It's dangerous to go alone, so don't. The new party mechanic means you can put together the perfect team to explore Zendikar. Let's go over how it works. A party consists of up to one cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard. To determine the number of creatures in your party, check if you control a cleric. If the answer is yes, you now have a member in your party. Do the same for each other class. Each creature can only be counted once. For example, a cleric wizard only counts as a cleric or a wizard, not both. If a creature has more than one party creature type, and there are multiple ways to count the creature that could result in a different number of creatures in your party, the highest such number is used. An ability referring to the number of creatures in your party gets a number from 0 to 4. Such abilities never ask which creatures are in your party, and you never have to designate specific creatures as being in your party. You can't choose to exclude creatures from this count to lower the number. Edge cases. If a spell has a cost reduction based on the number of creatures in your party, no player may attempt to change that number after you begin to cast the spell, but before you pay the cost. If an ability of a creature counts the number of creatures in your party, that number is counted as the ability resolves. If that creature is still on the battlefield when the ability resolves, it'll be counted if appropriate.
Is it late game? Do you find yourself with way more mana than you know what to do with? Well, do I ever have a returning mechanic for you? Kicker is back, giving you the chance to spend even more mana on your late game top decks. Kicker represents an optional additional cost that you may choose to pay as you cast the spell. A spell cast with that additional cost paid is kicked. Things to remember about Kicker. You can't pay a Kicker cost more than once. If you put a permanent with a Kicker ability onto the battlefield without casting it, you can't kick it. If you copy a kicked spell, the copy is also kicked. If a card or token enters the battlefield as a copy of a permanent that's already on the battlefield, the new permanent isn't kicked, even if the original was. An ability that triggers when a player casts a kicked spell resolves before the spell that caused it to trigger, but after targets have been chosen for that spell. It resolves even if that spell is countered. An ability that refers to a kicker ability refers to a card that has a kicker cost, not one that has an ability that merely cares about kicker. The converted mana cost of the spell doesn't change if it's kicked.
It's finally back. The greatest mechanic in the history of all of Magic the Gathering, Landfall. By simply playing a land, you'll receive immeasurable value.
Well, it's not flying.
Just let me have this. A Landfall ability triggers whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control for any reason. It triggers whenever you play a land, as well as whenever a spell or ability puts a land onto the battlefield under your control. A landfall ability doesn't trigger if a permanent already on the battlefield becomes a land. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, each landfall ability of the permanents you control will trigger. You can put them on the stack in any order. The last ability you put on the stack will be the first to resolve. Thanks for watching, and enjoy playing with Zendikar Rising.
Remember, if you have any questions, get a hold of a judge.